And that's it. We are going live. So, so welcome to the late night design show. Tonight's guest, Erika Hall, co-founder of Mule Design, author of Conversational Design and Just Enough Research, both from A Book Apart. Vlad Magdalin, co-founder, CEO of WebFlow app. Dan Cederholm, co-founder of Dribbble and host of Overtime. Pretty cool podcast. So let's get started. Let me stop sharing my screen here. You're going to see all my notes, by the way. And we're going to see this weird. And there you go. Now we're here. How are you doing, guys?
Fantastic.
Fantastic. Great. That's great. It's such an honor to have you. You don't even know how nervous I've been all this week because I feel like I have the CEOs, co-founders of some of the the best tools and just like the stuff that is like so influential in the design community. So I was a little bit nervous, but it's so great to have you here. I think we know you for all the stuff that you have been able to accomplish. For example, you, Dan, with Dribbble, probably one of the best communities for sharing your work for designers. You, Vlad, who are making designing for the web easy for everyone, and you, Erika Hall, just like inspiring everyone and just like getting us to think the right way. But I always want to know, how do you start? And like really, like what was that first job that you had? Like for me, and I'm gonna say like my first job. My first job was as a like the guy that makes the bags for you on the groceries. Like I was 11 years old and I was putting your groceries in the bag and work for tips. It was great because after that I will go play video games, arcade games with all the money that you get. So and I don't know. After that, I realized that was it for me. I realized the value of like, if you make money, then you can spend it on the stuff that you really want to do. I didn't want to be making groceries. I just really wanted to go play arcade games. And then after that, that was it. That's all my life has been like that. Just making money to make the real thing that I really wanted to do. So I don't know. What was your first job? Like for you, Dan, how did it all start, and how did it actually impact your life, your trajectory?
Yeah. So first job, the first actual job that I had was, I think, for Domino's Pizza. And I think I was young. I was too young to be a driver. So I made pizzas.
You were making pizzas?
Yeah, I was making pizzas. And I remember there was a husband and wife that owned the franchise. This was in Needham, Massachusetts. And while I worked there, they were arrested for like fraud. What? They were skimming money off of the business. It was pretty amazing. And I remember feeling guilty about eating free pizza a lot there, and then I didn't feel guilty after that happened. So
that's good.
So yeah, that was my first introduction to making money for a living, but also like, watching some scandalous activity going on.
Did you learn from them, and now you're like being a scandalous activities too?
Yeah, I certainly knew how not to skim money from a pizza chain.
That's great.
So I had that under my belt, from the get go, which was great.
What about you, Erika? How did it all started?
Oh, wow. My very first job was when I was about 12 years old. My mother was working at an art gallery, and the owner of the gallery hired me to be essentially her personal assistant every Saturday. And that was a lot of work. Like, I had to start by cleaning the area around this property she owned. I had to brush her Pekingese dogs. I had to literally polish the silver. And just do whatever.
So
I didn't last very long.
Gallery? This was actually just her house?
Yeah, because she owned all these businesses and property, and she's like, oh, I need like a person to do all this stuff. And I think I made it a couple months, and she was paying me pretty well, but there was a point as like, illegal child labor where I said, I'd really like my Saturday back. And she said, well, she's like, no, if you don't come in, because I said I wasn't feeling too well. She said, if you don't come in, that's it. You have to be here every Saturday. And I'm like, I'm a kid, man. We're done here. And so that was also the first job I ever quit.
That's great. That's great. So you as a kid, you realized like, okay, no, I need my time. Even at that age, you were just like, no,
yeah,
I am a kid. You were aware.
Yeah. I'm like some work-life balance. Like the money was pretty good because I was getting paid. I think it was something like $5 an hour. It was like more than minimum wage at the time. But she worked me. I put in like a full day on my Saturday, and it was like more money. I'd walk away with like $40 or something. But I'm like, this is not even worth it.
Work-life balance. Tough things that you learned there.
Early lesson. Yeah.
Early lesson. Yeah. What are you, Vlad?
So does it count as a job if you don't get paid, even if you're working?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. If you were working, if you were producing something, I don't know. You have a responsibility.
I think both of these were probably illegal child labor, my first and second job. Just to set some context, my family immigrated from Russia in 1991 when I was 9. So my parents were just like, America is amazing, the land of opportunity. Russia wasn't exactly the beacon of hope in the early 90s. So my first job was actually my dad opening up like this import-export business for pipes, like these PVC pipes. And he would take these catalogs of pipes from other companies, and I would use Corel Draw to copy illustrations as vectors to make our own catalog, and not to just basing everything on other companies' catalogs. So I did that for multiple years, but I don't think I ever got paid. I just got food on the table. But my actual first job was also with kind of the Russian community in Sacramento, of which there are like hundreds of thousands of people there now. And it was for the Yellow Page company there, the Russian Yellow Pages. And I worked for 3 months making like calendars, business cards, and things like that. And I remember my dad and the owner negotiating my entire payment for the summer. And I worked day and night, 12 hours a day for 3 months. And I think I got $250. So I'm pretty sure that was not legal.
No.
and a little less than whatchamacallit, minimum wage. But it taught me a lot. I'm so glad I had that experience.
Those were the times, right, when child labor was acceptable.
Exactly. And Corel Draw. Corel Draw was a thing, if anybody remembers that.
Dude, Corel Draw. I used that all the time. That was it. I was like, no, Illustrator, no, not really. Corel Draw is for me.
And you know what the best thing was about Corel Draw? They would send out inspiration books, like these huge books of what other illustrators did with it. And it was so amazing. This was like before the days of the internet, where you could really get inspired by what other creatives are doing.
I never got that because I had the pirate version. they didn't have my address or anything. So
did I mention my parents were Russian? So I'm pretty sure I had the pirated version too.
But somehow you still got those things. So,
I guess.
So I wonder like how now you have all these things that you do, but do you ever have any spare time? And what do you do with it if you do have any? Like Dan, I know, for example, you do your podcast. Is that like what you consider your spare time?
It's funny that's actually one of the things I do still for work. So that for Dribbble, I've backed down about halftime with Dribbble, and overtime is one of the things that I do, and I love doing it because I get to talk to people like Vlad and Pablo actually, and soon to be Erika, who we need to have on there. But yeah, so that's what I'm focused on work wise these days. That and some event stuff that we're doing at Dribbble. But you know, and then there's spare time. That's a good question. I like to stay busy, so I like to just keep creating stuff. So I'm just trying new things. It's like making things, and you know, yeah, and drinking wine and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, this like work, there's a blurry line between work and your spare time.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the goal, right? To get to a point where you don't think about spare time or work time, and it's just sort of it's time to make things, time to create things, and then there's time to sleep and take care of yourself. And
you were talking about
family
this,
and friends.
Like having that work-life balance. Like, do you how do you do that? Is there any in your life?
Yeah, I think it's the same. It really just it all bleeds together, and I think it mostly works out. And the things that, especially this year, I've cut back on the traveling a little bit, and I've just been trying to spend time in San Francisco and reconnect with some of my older friends, because I've been traveling so much in the past few years, and you know, this city it's expensive, and if you live here, you know, you might as well enjoy it. So I've really been trying to go out. Like, I saw all this live music this weekend, and
that's great.
So that's what I try to do. I try to get away from the computer a little bit, but I also just like started a really stupid podcast about 80s movies. So that's my free time podcast. I'm very excited about. Yeah.
How many episodes do you have?
Oh, just the one so far, because I don't know if you know Matt Howie, who founded Metafilter and works at Slack now.
Yes.
I was talking about watching some 80s movies, and he said, you should. He had this whole concept. He's like, you should call it Surprisingly Problematic, and talk about everything that those movies when you were a child you loved, that now you watch it and it's like horrifying. And so he was my very first guest, and I have a whole lineup of people. Christina Halverson's going to be on next, talking about
awesome.
St. Elmo's Fire. So yeah, it's a good time. So
what
that's
was the first movie that you talked about?
Pretty in Pink.
Pretty in Pink.
Oh, perfect.
So what was the problematic part of Pretty in Pink?
It wasn't too bad. The most problematic parts are probably just that it's like, you know, it's all white kids. The guys are a little, you know, insensitive. There's a tremendous amount of the ages are sort of wrong. Like, James Spader is supposed to be a high school kid, but he actually looks 30. And he's like cutting cocaine through the whole thing.
Right.
But I definitely recommend a listen, because Matt Howie's Morrissey impression that he does like halfway through the episode, that's a beautiful thing. I treasure and feel really good about having kind of brought into the world, you know.
That's great. I need to add it to my podcast now. What about you, Vlad? What do you do on your spare time? And also, like, by the way, what do you do?
Well, now, actually, a little aside, I now feel left out, or a bit. My imposter syndrome is spiking because I'm the only one here without my own podcast. So I'll have to think of something to create.
Everybody has a podcast now, man.
Yeah,
I know.
That's true.
I know.
That's true, Vlad.
And to be honest, when I was first starting WebFlow 5 years ago, there was no free time. It was just, you know, work, sleep, get sick, sleep less, work more, etc. But thankfully, you know, a couple years into the startup, things stabilized. And now I would say my work-life balance is even better than it's been at the previous startup where I used to work, which is a huge, you know, Fortune 100. And I think the key to that is, one is I have 2 kids, and they're in the age, the 2 girls, 7 and 9, and they're in that age where you just don't want to miss it. Like, everyone you talk to who treated their company as being more important than their family, and then look back on it 10 years later or 15 years later, and they tell you, just, Vlad, don't do that. Don't repeat my mistake. And so many people said that to me that it was unavoidable, right? And now every day I never leave work past 5:45. I'm always spending, except for Tuesdays, we have like a Taco Tuesday exception every 2 weeks. And I just spend it with my kids doing random stuff, playing. We enjoy a lot of co-op couch video games. They each get to pick a date they want to go on every 2 weeks. So every other week I'm like doing something like Chuck E. Cheese or bowling or learning how to paint porcelain. So there's a lot of kid stuff going on right now. Just today we're building a bunch of random Lego stuff like wallet holders and back massagers and whatever. So it's like a big asterisk of who knows whatever the kids come up with, and it's all fun.
You should do a podcast with your kids, man.
Ooh,
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
That'd be good. Like Startup Dad. Startup Dad would be an awesome podcast.
Startup Dad.
Right?
Actually, that would
wow.
Right there.
Yeah.
subscribe.
To like give people, because I think a lot of dads need permission to
right,
put
let's
their
workshop
families
this.
first. Startup Dad, man. Yeah.
Startupdad.com. I think it's available, man.
So good.
It's on.
So good.
Somebody's like
talk about,
somebody's registering right now just to like cyber squat it.
Well, yeah, you should grab startupd.ad. I think that would be cool.
That's a true startup.
Right?
Startup Dad, but with triple D.
Ooh,
Yes.
Dad.
and if that's taken,
Always.
if that's taken, I'll just call it Startup Vlad.
Ooh.
That's my one dad joke for the
Oh my God.
Vlad the Dad.
Startup Vlad, the Startup Dad. There you go.
Wow.
I love it.
And
Love
you
it.
just talk about all the cute stuff you do with your kids. Like that would be amazing. That'd be
It
so
would be,
good.
it would really be cool. Yeah.
All
It
right,
would.
it's on. Now
It's
now
on.
I have a new
It's on.
I now have a new mission.
That's how it works. That's how it works. You make a joke and all of a sudden you have a side project. That is absolutely how it works.
Nice.
So Vlad, you're mentioning like, well, now you have some spare time. You have the your work-life balance is a little bit better than it used to be. But for many years, it was work. So you obviously think that what you were doing is important, is still important, and I want to know why. What do you think it's important? Why does your company exist? What is the problem you're solving? What is this thing you want everyone to know that? Yeah, tell us.
Yeah. So to me, there was this one video that I saw called "Inventing on Principle" by Brett Victor that changed everything for me. I hope we can link to it afterwards, but it's something that I think every designer, every creator should see. And it really asks this question. I was working at this Fortune 100 company, and it asks this question like, why do you do the work that you do? And what is the principle that you base your work on? And it happened to be that the concept or the principle that Brett Victor in this video was talking about was the ability to create, to empower humans to create things via direct manipulation. So if I'm a sculptor, I'm able to directly, or if a kid is using like Play-Doh, they're able to directly create something. You know, with Lego, they're able to directly create something. And yet with software and with everything that we create on the internet, almost everything that's created that's of value is created via a chain of people and a chain of translation steps in order to get an idea or a concept into reality. And about 10 years ago, I realized this when I was working at an agency where I was doing this translation, and I was repeating it over and over and over and over, and seeing a designer struggle with, well, holy crap! Like, what if I was able to do that, and that person didn't have to rely on me as sort of like the gatekeeper of what's possible and what's not. So we talk a lot about accessibility on the web on the read side, you know, like to get people to consume, to get people to easier access content. But we spend very little time talking about the accessibility of creating for the web. And if you look at this concept of creating software, which everything on the web that's like a service or a portal or an area where, like a social network, it's all created with software. And the amount of people that can create software today makes up 0.25% of the world. So 1 out of every 400 people. it is able to write code to create stuff for like the most incredible, powerful medium that humanity has ever created. And that percentage has stayed the same over the last 25 years that the web has existed. Like even with like all these learn to code, code.org, all the tools and libraries that we've added in the last 25 years, that percentage basically hasn't changed. So why my company exists and why we're doing the work that we're doing is just to empower everyone who wants to be able to build software without having to scale this huge wall of learning how to code, which could take months, if not years, if not decades. So that's why we exist. We want to take this awesome power and take it from 0.25% of the world that can do it to 2.5%, and then 25%, and then who knows, maybe it'll be like closer to 50%. It's almost like if most people knew how to read, but very few people knew how to write, and we're trying to kind of equalize that balance. And today we're starting with what might look like a website builder, but really it's a stepping stone to creating more and more powerful software. So that's why we exist.
And to have that, like you were saying, like that direct manipulation, that is not that translation. It's just that you are the one that is actually creating something that is being put out there.
Exactly. You touch, you like move a thing, and that thing is the real thing, right? You don't have to go into some other view and see, oh, is this what I meant? And I think that's completely possible with many, many types of software that we're kind of building by hand today with in a text editor.
What about you, Erika? Tell us a little bit more about like what, I mean, you can tell us about the books that you have written, or just like your agency.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we started Mule because I love, I worked in a product company early in my career. I worked in a startup, and then I got into an agency, and I just loved agency work because I love going in and being able to just help people solve a problem and work on a project and then get out. I have kind of a short attention span, and I really like to see something happen pretty quickly. But then the other part of it is going in and doing this work. And so some of the projects, some of the problems are technology problems, like what Vlad was talking about. Like that's a great technology problem, that it's just, there's no way to directly manipulate things. There are these levels of abstraction that keep people from moving from an idea they have in their head to be able to make something. And so some really are technology problems like that. But what I've found is that most design problems are really people problems, right? And it's like, there's so much software, especially any piece of like project management software, is like, having conversations with other people is still terrifying. And it's so important. And then I found that like, wow, if whatever I can do, like coming in from the outside to help them, or to write a book that they can then use as kind of backup when they're having these hard conversations, that really helps so much. And that's the part that's really exciting, because it's, in theory, it's very simple. Like in theory, you're like, oh, I have a problem. Something's unclear. Oh, there's a problem with our business. Oh, somebody out in the world is having an issue that we can build software to help with. And then the reason that goes wrong is so often not the technology. It's because people are terrified of other people. And so that's what's exciting to me, is especially like even with the research, right? People don't do research not because they don't have money or they don't have time, but because everybody's afraid of asking questions. Everybody wants to feel like they have an answer, because you get rewarded in school and you get rewarded like in your job for being right. You do not get rewarded for asking a question. And so, I wrote just enough research because I was tired of having clients say, can we not do research? And coming up with reasons to not do research. I'm like, that's ridiculous. How do you solve a problem without having enough information to solve a problem? Yeah. And so that's like, and what I found is like working with clients, like the way that we work, coming in and just being direct and being about the communication and not being about the artifacts as much, is a different way of approaching design. And so that's sort of what we started with and what we continue to do now, more with like the writing and teaching and training and talking than with the doing the design work. And it seems like there's a huge need for that. And it's really fun to help people get over this like fear that everybody has.
Yeah. Actually, like last week, we were talking specifically about research, and we had a researcher from Google and someone from Envision too. And we were talking about this apathy that you're mentioning, sometimes from companies, and they say like there's no budget for that. There's probably no need for that, and they would just like steer away from doing research. So I find it really interesting that you're saying like, well, let's do just enough research, the necessary for this. But I also, and we're also talking about like, well, there's also the argument that in the beginning, a lot of these people that are visionaries, they're people that are thinking out there, have this idea that if they do research, they're not going to find the answers because the answers are not out there, because the people don't really know the problems that they're trying to solve. You, as people that have started something, you started Mule Design, you started Dribbble, you started a WebFlow app. How much influence had research in that, and like in starting that? Because like there's this theory that people that start new businesses like that don't really do any research. There is more about that idea that they have. So did you do any research? Like, for example, you, Dan, did you do any research before you started Dribbble, or you, Vlad, before you started WebFlow?
I can say no, for sure, zero for Dribbble. I mean, I think, and I'm really guilty of just about everything I do comes from the gut and it in my intuition, I guess, and very little research. But I'll get to a better place in a second, because I think that you know, for Dribbble, it was like a side project, and it was like a very simple problem that I think we wanted to solve initially, which was just, I wanted to see what people are working on, like friends and colleagues, and give them a space to do that. And I think it certainly evolved over the years to really something a lot bigger than that, and a community is really what it is, and it's about the people, I think. But and so now I think research plays a really big role at Dribbble, and we have, you know, people on staff now that specifically do research and talk to users. I mean, our research back in the early days of Dribbble was just going to meetups and meeting people and talking with them and trying to get you know, in-person feedback from the people that were using the site. And I think that we should have and could have done a lot more in the beginning, but it really was from the gut initially.
Yeah. What are you, Vlad?
So same as Dan initially. I think we were lucky in that we were our own users. We were creating for ourselves. So we were trying to create a tool that my brother, who's 100% a designer, doesn't know how to code, could use to do the same type of work that I, as a developer, could do. So he was our research subject initially. You know, we didn't have the time nor the money to go find other users, A, because the product didn't work as we were designing it, and B, we didn't really know anybody in the area. We just moved from Sacramento and kind of were didn't have any resources here to get connected to people. I think over time, we definitely, as our products got more and more complex, we started doing a lot more research before building something big. And I think we're kind of in the belief that you can do a ton of research and get a lot of quantitative data, but at the end of the day, a lot of what you're going to learn is going to be like sitting next to somebody who's trying to use a product or your prototype and like having real human conversations with them, seeing their pain points, seeing them like struggle through a problem. There's so many more insights there than sometimes what you can get from like product analytics or you know, clickstream data or something like that, where some of that data might even be misleading, where you might want to make a call on it that goes against what your gut is saying, but you still sometimes going with your gut is a better option, just because you have that intuition and that sort of sense that you get from actually talking to somebody, even though you might not have 1,000 responses that you average out and say like, hey, this is the way to go. And there have definitely been some times where all the data is telling us to build feature X, like, all of our users, all of our requests, everything says do it this way, kind of the traditional, you ask the users what they want, they say faster horse or something like that. And we end up building what we imagine to be a more streamlined solution, and it takes off, and sometimes it doesn't. So there's still a lot of intuition, definitely a lot more conversations with actual users and customers and real people or potential customers, but definitely a lot more data informed than before, but still not 100% in that direction, which I don't think we'll ever be, just because there's just a lot of many edge cases where humans just don't behave like a spreadsheet might.
Yeah. What do you think, Erika? Do you see this a way of starting something, like going with your gut first, like as a way to go, and then after that, like start validating some of your ideas, or how do you go about that?
Well, I think there's sort of a wrong idea about what research is that people come into it with. And I'd say, like, when you talk about your gut, what that really is a lot of times, that's your experience. Yeah. Like, that's your observations of the world. Like, if you see a problem, like that's kind of the same as like research. And I'm actually moving away from using the word research to just talking about evidence-based design, to say, oh, do you have evidence for your decisions? Because when you talk about your gut, it's either your experience or it's confirmation bias. It's what you want to be true. And it's just a matter of separating the two. But if you're like, a lot of companies have started because an entrepreneur observed something in the world, and that counts. Yeah. That's the same. It's like and I think people do bad research when they have this false idea of like, oh, it's got to be quantitative. Like having more data points is necessarily better. You just have to start from like, what information do you actually need? But and everybody,
can I change my answer? Because now I can say I did tons of research.
Yeah,
we did
absolutely.
36 years of research basically to get to that point.
Right.
Thank you.
No,
it wasn't just an idea that came out of nowhere. It was really a problem you were experiencing, a problem you were seeing, and something that you wanted to act on, right?
Yeah.
From experience, like you're saying.
I love it. You guys are smart. I don't know why I'm here.
There you go. So next time, we did a lot of research. That's the answer.
Yeah. Because if you look at you look at any decision people make in the world, like my example I always use is like, you talk to somebody about buying a car, right? And okay, maybe you're going to spend $50,000 on a car. Like, nobody will just hand their money over and say, just give me a car, right? People will talk to their friends. They'll think about, how am I really going to use this car? They'll look at reviews. They'll look at specs, right? And then that same person will have, a $500,000 budget for a project. And they'll say, no time and money for research. Because they have this wrong idea about what that means. But it's like, would you really do months of research before buying a car or buying a house, but then do no research before a huge software project? That makes no sense. And I think that's because there's a wrong concept of what research is or what the standard is. Like, you're not publishing a paper in a peer-reviewed journal. You're trying to make a product that works, that's successful, that makes money. And so whatever you do, however you get information to do that, that's great. Like, I hate the term guerrilla research, because that makes it sound like there's a big standard. Like, oh, if you spend a lot of time, if you spend a lot of money, if you look at 50,000 data points, that's better research. No. If you learn something and then you can use what you learn to make a better product faster, great. Who cares? As long as you're being ethical and spending your time and money well, whatever you learn, however you learn it, is great, because it's not about the research. You're not writing a paper. You're building a product or a service or something. So that's like, and what I find is this message, what I'm telling you right now, is apparently shocking to a lot of people. And so I can just go around and continue to give this message for the rest of my life is kind of how I feel.
For me, it's very comforting. It's just like, oh,
good.
Great.
Good. Yeah.
It's sort of like telling somebody who's watching TV all day that they burn calories just by learning by lifting the remote, right?
Keep on.
It's very inspirational. Exactly. Just do it more often.
I do.
For me, I think it's life changing for me because now I'm a researcher. You know?
Everybody's a researcher, though.
I love it.
Like
yeah, exactly.
Professional context, and all of a sudden there's like this stress, and it's like, no, the important part is the question you're asking. Like, that's the important part. How you find the answer totally depends on the question. So you think, like, what do I need to know to make this decision?
Yeah. And
like however you find it out, like, you could spend a day, you could spend a year, but you should just always be learning. And the problem is, like, when, as a design consultant, when I come in and people in charge are threatened by it, that's where it goes wrong, because they don't want the answer to be out in the world somewhere. They want to be like, oh, I had this genius idea without any information. Like, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Like, you do research on what to make for dinner. You know, how are you supposed to have, like, oh, this genius idea? Like, everybody's still on the Steve Jobs thing. Like, oh, he had magic ideas. No, that's Apple marketing. He had the magic idea of put up a big shiny wall and never reveal how you develop those products. And then all the competitors are like, oh, magic. But no, it's like secrecy. There's no magic. It's all behind the wall.
Yeah. So I want to go into the news of the week. I have some 3 news for us to share, and actually after that have a discussion. So hold on, let me share my screen really quickly, and share my screen, share with everybody. Can you see my screen now? You're seeing my notes and everything.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So let's go in the news. So, I feel like every week a brand gets a refresh. So this week it was Evernote's turn. So Evernote got a refresh of their brand, and they wanted to go for something unique, recognizable, and iconic, I suppose, like everybody else. There were a lot of explorations of Matt's. I didn't even know that the elephant had a name, but Matt's, the elephant, their mark. There were a lot of explorations. For their work mark, they landed... oh, by the way, yeah, this is what they landed, which is not very different from what they have right now. So there wasn't a lot of transformation on this. But for their work mark, they landed on Publico, which is a stereotypeface with a timeless feel, as they describe it. I did see the icon change, but this is how it was before and the after. Apparently, I have a very, very pixelated image of the before. Sorry about that. And I did see the icon change. Oh, these are the colors. I don't know, if you use Evernote, you're gonna see it like that. There wasn't a giant change on their UI. Actually, none. By the way, how meta is this? These are the notes from today, and I'm seeing it on Evernote. And now I want to show you about Origami Simulator. This is an experiment by Amanda Gasai, and it's just an origami simulator with paper but digital. You can see the strain, like how much pressure is on the paper. And you can grab it and actually just like be really rough with it and see how now the pressure just like has been where you grabbed it. It changed. And yeah, there's nothing really here. I just found it really neat, and I think you guys should check it out. Now, on the deeper level of the news, we go into designers' self-promotion. And for this, actually, I saw, first I want to tell you how I found out about this. And this was from Koidin. He wrote an article, in his blog, subtraction.com, about the state of design discourse. This was in February, I think. And he was arguing that it was on an arrested development. And this inspired UX Collective to write, which is the largest medium publication about design and UX, to write an article and an essay too. And then Coy also wrote an article about that article, then inspired the article. So that's how the news work these days. So the essay was about designers being very good at shamelessly promoting themselves. And the problem, as according to Coy, was that most of what's published in our industry is written by designers themselves. And this inspired the UX Collective, and they started, like, you know what, analyzing even their own articles and articles from other publications, and the different things that they were, the principles that they were seeing on these articles were based on independence, like writers who will not profit from their content, the depth, like going beyond the surface, how honest those articles were, like a thoughtful criticism focused on the design and not really the designer, and the breadth, like how the broader impact of design, not only in the community. And every link shared between for a month was analyzed. This is the stuff that we're seeing. Pretty, I don't know, for people that love spreadsheets, they will probably love this. And they checked Medium, Reddit, Sidebar, and others. And the links were considerably heavier on the tactical side of the spectrum, like software tricks, templates, kits, tutorials. I'm kind of guilty of that, to be honest. And then hard news, and then all the way, it was from tactical to strategic, and all the way to the right, they were talking about ethics, responsibility, the impact of design that is not just in the community but outside of the community. And there were just like only 0.9% of that. So there was obviously a reduced amount of content on that side, and it was more on the tactical. And most of what was written, according to our analysis, it was just around 5 minutes read. Apparently we don't have time for, because you can see on Medium now, like how long does it take. And yeah, so now my question to us, how can we go deeper, like beyond our community? How can we, like, for example, Erika, I think when you talk about research, you talk about the importance about asking why, and then with your podcast, you ask the tough questions and we get to know other designers. And Vlad, like WebFlow, does an amazing job at educating designers about web design, because you also have that is not just about the tool, but also about design itself. And how, my question is, like, how do we go into deeper reflections? How can we drive our discussions to go beyond our community? And is it even important? And let me stop sharing. And I don't know, whoever wants to start with this question. How is it even important? Should we just keep talking about UX tricks and extensions and favorite plugins for everyone?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's incredibly important. And I just wrote last month, I wrote an 18-minute read about this stuff. So I'm there, man. Oh. But it's hard, because that's what people, and now I can tell you, because we're doing so many things with internal teams now, so many workshops and trainings, people want a shortcut. And that's why the tips and tricks, everybody's looking for a how-to. But the problem is we all have to have that discipline and say, like, okay, we have to write things that are harder to write and harder to consume, and kind of elevate the conversation. And I think that's on every experienced designer to take it up a level. But it's hard. It's much harder than to talk about tactics and tricks.
Yeah, and Erika, like, I would say you are the exception, by the way, because they were also analyzing the amount of people that are leaders in the industry. How many of them actually get to write? And it was a very small amount of people. The people that have that knowledge, that probably can be talking more about the strategy and about the ethics of design. They say, I don't have the time to share my stuff. I just like don't have the time to write. And I would say, Erika, thank you. You are one of the few people that actually write. You are the 0.9%. But how and I will say this, I still think that talking about tricks and all that stuff and just like tactical stuff is still important, but there has to be a balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we get there? How do we get you, Erika? How do you get other people to talk about that and sharing more about that?
Shaming them.
Shaming them, yes.
Yeah, because seriously, there's a design magazine called How, but there is not a design magazine called Why. And I think it's like every person who gets in there who asks, why are we even doing this? You know, I think like, you know, John Maeda does some good work here, but it's true, there are very few people. And you look at so much, and the UX community is like, fight. And it's like, come on, who cares? Who cares what your title is? Who cares? Are you a content designer? Are you a writer? Are you? Who cares? It's like, what are you trying to accomplish in the world? Like, what's your goal? And I think it just takes everybody like it's that one conversation at a time to be like, okay, let's talk up here. You know? So that's the only way. There's no how to elevate the discourse in 3 easy steps. It really is just like every time you talk to somebody, try to get it to a higher level. And it's hard. And writing is terrible.
We need a tactical article about being strategic.
You got it. Oh my God.
That's what we need.
Yeah, this is such a hard topic to think about, like the tactics of tackling, because it's just like, you know, parenting, for example. You want to raise moral children, right? But anytime something happens when you know, they misbehave or they're sort of doing their kind of day-to-day stuff, the first thing you want to do is like Google something like, how do you deal with blah, right? You don't want to take the hard approach and have, you know, real conversation about right and wrong and morality and whatever. Like the human response is, what's the shortcut? What's the shortcut? And when we look at, you know, like news and things that get clicks, like listicles and tips and tricks, it's easier to write, like Erika said. There's also usually a profit motive. Like most of the content marketing you see, including from my own company, and I'll probably wager most companies like Envision, etc. The reason those content marketers are on staff is to usually sell a product, and sometimes you know, can get some kind of broader, higher level writing out of it. So it's a very hard thing to just say, we're going to take step 1, 2, 3 to get there. I think it requires a conscious, maybe exactly what Erika said, like shaming or getting more people to think at a higher, like moral level, like what is our responsibility to society in order to have these harder conversations, to have use our position of influence to actually drive for change. One of my favorite people online right now is this woman named Sonia Gupta. She was a lawyer turned programmer, and she has like these super hard conversations around, you know, sometimes involves calling people out, sometimes involves talking about you know, the privilege that many of us have, the institutional bias and like what many other people have to struggle with. And that's a hard conversation. Like she gets heat for it all the time. Like she gets, those are the things when you publish something that talks about, you know, ethics or the right thing to do, people come out of the woodwork and like make fun of you and shame you. And it's really, really hard work. It's always, it takes so much courage to be able to do that. And I don't know what the answer is. The answer is for, I think, for all of us to talk about it more and to encourage each other and like support each other to go deeper, and have that courage to sometimes be disliked, and know that some of us are here to back us up in case the mobs attack.
Yeah, and I would say I'm kind of also, when I was saying I'm guilty of that, is I have, with this YouTube channel, a lot of my content, most of my content is on tricks and just like how to do this thing, this very specific thing. And why? It's because it was easy. It was easier for me to just create a content about something that you press this button and this happens. There's no discussion around it because it's very concrete. There's not going to be opinions about it. You press that button and that happens. Versus like, I have this thought, I think that we should do this, and this is an idea, is very different. And then you, like you're saying, Vlad, and then it's scary to get these people that don't think like that, these people that would disagree with you. So it is that. It is also about being, it's hard, it's scary to talk about those things.
I would say, Pablo, that I'm glad you do those tips and tricks things. I mean, what's wrong with tips and tricks? I don't know. I find the analysis of that a little odd because it's sort of like an echo chamber too. It's like, what do we want to hear more of, and how do we get there? I don't know. Maybe I've had too much wine, but I think like I just want to hear more things from more people. And it's really hard. Like, I think Erika mentioned this before. Writing is really hard. And getting people to write things that aren't short tweets or easy photos to put, like, it's hard to get people to write thoughtful pieces, right? And I'm guilty of that too. Like, I can't find the time. I used to be able to do this, and I can't find the time to do it now. And it's that problem. I think we'll always have that problem where we want to hear more about the why, and but it's difficult to get that. I think it's one thing to yearn for it, but it's another thing to actually do it. I think that's the tough part.
Okay, so I want to go into questions. And Edgar, do you have any questions? Because people, they're online right now, they're on the chat, and they can ask questions. So probably we can go with one question. Like, we have time for only one question, I think.
Yeah, so I'll pull one of the more solid questions out. So one of the questions asked was, what do you guys feel the role of UX and UI is? And is UI diminished to just visuals? And does separating them even make sense?
It's all web design to me. I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah.
Next question.
Next question.
I didn't know. I'm sorry. That sounded like kind of annoying. But I think that the constant sort of questioning of what UX is and what design is, and it's just, I don't know. I think it's all design. It's all of it's sort of experience design, and I think the more we treat it holistically, the better. Anyway, I'll let smarter people on here answer that too. But
Vlad?
Yeah, I would echo the same thing. I think designers, however you want to like slice up disciplines, are there to understand and empathize with an actual problem and find a solution for it. And some people are more skilled at some slices of that picture. Like, maybe somebody is super great at making icons and they specialize in that. Maybe someone is really great at content architecture and they want to specialize in that. And there's many opportunities where there's enough work that its specialization makes sense. But at the end of the day, a role of a designer can be as broad as one single person doing all of the above, right? Maybe not as deep as an expert in that area would, but really breaking that problem and creating a solution, because a solution that's created that might not be like pixel perfect is still orders of magnitude better than no solution. So a designer that is, might call themselves a UX designer or a designer that might call themselves a visual designer. At the end of the day, if they zoom out enough, they're basically doing the same job. They're trying to abstract away some sort of solution for a given problem. I think there's no perfect answer to this. I hope, I'm working towards a world where a single designer is able to have the tools at their fingertips to be able to solve many of these types of design problems. Just like Today, you might have a 3D animation studio with 200 people creating a feature-length movie and doing like very specific parts of that process, like storyboarding, modeling, shading, skeleton rigging, etc. But you create the tools that even a single person with a vision for a short story, for example, is able to use those tools and do all of the above. Maybe not as well as like Pixar might, but they are the designer of a story. They are the designer of an experience they want to put out to the world, just like as a software designer is a designer of a solution for a given real world problem. So I think these kind of minute conversations about what is UX, what is UI, what is product design, what is prototyping design or whatever, really at the end of the day, we're just trying to take real problems, solve them, and deliver more value to the world, and therefore create more wealth.
Awesome. Erika, you got any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And it's like, I wish people would stop having these arguments about this terminology and focus on like, what problem are you solving, like Vlad was just saying, and what's the goal? And what effect are you having on the world? Like, what effect do you want to have on the world? And I think this all comes from people being so focused on what artifacts they're creating, right? It's like, oh, what tool are you working in? Are you working like InVision or Sketch or Photoshop or Word? And you get this like really strong identification. And I think we need to set all that aside and get people to just talk. Again, it all comes back to talking to each other more and not hiding behind the artifact you're producing. And I think that's where people get into these lower level arguments, is because there's this terror of like, oh, if I'm not making a tangible thing that people value, then do I have a stake in the conversation? Do I have a place at the table? And we have to get past that, because look, look what happened to the world while we were fighting about UI and UX.
Yeah,
right.
Seriously.
Good point.
I mean that totally honestly, instead of saying like, oh, how are we defining the problem? How are we defining who's the user, who's the customer, what value is being created for whom, by what? And I think anybody in any of these roles can participate in that conversation.
Yeah, and I echo those sentiments actually. Like, I actually believe that everyone is a designer. And what that means to you, we can get into some other place. But if you are somewhere making decisions, you are a designer. Should we separate UX and UI? That's always bugged me, because they're kind of, they interact with each other, and I think separating them has been one of the craziest things to me. Like, yeah, you can be specialized in something, and that's great, but really, to me, it boils down to understanding the individual. Some people excel in certain areas, some people do better at some of the softer skills, but really, for me, it's about being human. Like, the thing that's always separated design and art for me is that design is rooted in empathy, in search of a solution. So if you're being empathetic, you're being more human. So you're in pursuit of a solution, and how we get that is really wrapping all these things together. So to me, it's like, no need to separate them, just find solutions. And that's why I tend to feel that most of us are designers.
Agreed. Well said.
Agreed.
All right, well, we're wrapping up on time. I'm going to shimmy on out and let Pablo back in.
Thank you so much, Edgar. That was Edgar Chaparro. He's helping us on the chat and the community, and he's been answering some of the questions too. Thank you so much, Edgar. And now I just want to. We are wrapping up. It's been an hour. I want to thank you so much. Apparently, we lost Erika. Probably she's having trouble with her connection. But I just wanted to thank you, first of all. And I know you are really busy people, and you're here on a Sunday night, really late, doing this. And I think people appreciate it. I appreciate it. And I just want to finish by you sharing something about, where can people find you if you're hiring, if there's a new project you're working on that you want other people to know about. So yeah, like what is, or probably just, it doesn't have to be a new project, something that you have been working on for a long time, probably too. What are you, Dan?
Yeah. So let's see. Dribbble is hiring for sure, and we're growing the team, which is fantastic. As I alluded to earlier, I'm working half time at Dribbble, and then I'm half time on other things. I got a puppy who's sleeping below me here, and thank God he didn't wake up during this. But yeah, and otherwise, I'm making things like pins and patches and stuff, and so I'm sort of launching a new brand, outdoorsy stuff, and that's been fun because I just wanted to get back at making physical products again, and learning how that works, and hopefully sharing the process of like getting things made, for real. And so anyway, there'll be more of that later on, but that's what I'm going to be up to next.
That's amazing, man. I want to learn more about that. Does it
Great.
have a name or?
Yeah, it's Adventure Supply Company, and it's adventures misspelled, of course, because that's what I like to do with projects, misspell words. And yeah, it's not quite ready to launch, but it should be soon, very soon, maybe over the next few weeks.
That's great, Dan. Thank you.
Yeah, little plug
Erika,
there, little plug.
Erika, we lost you a little bit there, but we're just sharing debriefing, which is where can people find you, or if you're hiring in your company, or if you have something, a new project that you want other people to know about that you're excited, or it doesn't have to be new, something, whatever.
Let's see, muledesign.com. I've been doing a lot more on LinkedIn, weirdly. And I'd say that the thing that we're doing now that I think is cool is we have a new podcast. Like, it's all about podcasts now. Everybody's got to have a podcast called The Voice of Design, that is about trying to have more conversations about higher level issues. So we're having all these guests on, various designers, to talk about, to step outside the how and talk more about what is it we're doing, what are we trying to accomplish, and some higher level issues. So yeah, that's on all your favorite places you get podcasts, iTunes, etc. And I'd say that's
just search for The Voice of Design.
Voice of Design, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And you are there, you are interviewing?
Yeah, it's 2 to 3 of us at Mule on any given episode. Yeah, we had a great conversation with Koi. We just had our latest episode is about working with the government and the public, what's going on in the public sector in design. So that's a good one.
How are you, Vlad? Where can people find you? What's going on?
So I'm on, I think the only social network I'm on is Twitter. So just @call me Vlad.
Call me Vlad.
Yeah. And of course, we're hiring at WebFlow. You can check out webflow.com. Check out we're actually specifically looking for brand designers right now, really creative brand designers, because our tool is for creatives and we want to really show off the power. So if you can imagine yourself building the kind of sites that webflow.com that you see on there and all the little sub pages, reach out to me. I would love to talk to you. Product designers, I think we're always looking for great designers. In terms of projects, I'm starting a new podcast called Startup Dad with my daughters.
Yes.
Domain TBD. I'll send it out later. But look out for that sometime soon.
That's great. That's great. I love it. I really look forward for that. Well, okay, that's a wrap. Thank you so much again for being here, and thank you so much for all the people that were there on the chat. We're doing this every weekend. Next Sunday, we are going to be talking all about UI animation. So we're going to have Pascal de Silva. We're going to have the motion designer from Google Material. And yeah, it's going to be fun. So hopefully we get to see you there. And that's it. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Do we have a music for the outro?
Thank you, Pablo.
Yeah, thank you.
That's the music.
Thanks.
It's a little bit low, but okay. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.